child safety myself, but in the documents that I read, Facebook articulates the idea that parents today are not aware of how dangerous Instagram is, and because they themselves did not live through these experiences, they can't coach their kids on basic safety things. And so, at a minimum, Facebook should have to disclose what it knows in that context.
Okay, so we're trying to protect individuals' data that they're gathering, have data privacy, but have transparency in the manner in which the data is used. Can we bridge that gap?
Imagine, I think reasonable people can have a conversation on how many people need to see a piece of content before it's not really private. Like if 100,000 people see something, is it private? If 25,000 people see it, is it private? Just disclosing the most popular content on the platform, including statistics around what factors went into the promotion of that content, would cause radically more transparency than we have today on how Facebook chooses what we get to focus on, how they shape our reality.
Okay, if our focus is protecting the First Amendment and our rights to free speech while very carefully regulating data privacy, I've heard there are a number of things that are being discussed in Congress. Everything from antitrust laws to calling Facebook a utility, to the idea that you just raised of a regulatory board of some sort that has authority to, through understanding of the algorithms and how they're used and other mechanisms that create what we see, the face of Facebook, so to speak. Tell me a little more about how you envision that board working. What is in your mind, based on your understanding of the company and the ill consequences, what is the best approach to bridging the gap between keeping speech free and protecting individual privacy with regard to data?
So I think those issues are, they're independent issues. So we can talk about free speech first, which is having more transparency. Like Facebook has solutions today that are not content-based. And I am a strong advocate for non-content-based solutions because those solutions will also then protect the most vulnerable people in the world. In a place like Ethiopia where they speak 6 languages, if you have something that focuses on good ideas and bad ideas, those systems don't work in diverse places. So investing in non-content-based ways to slow the platform down not only protects our freedom of speech, it protects people's lives. The second question is around privacy, and this question of how can we have oversight and have privacy. There is lots and lots of research on how to abstract data sets, so you're not showing people's names. You might not even be showing the content of their post. You might be showing data that is about the content of their post, but not the post itself. There are many ways to structure these data sets that are privacy conscious, and the fact that Facebook has walled off the ability to see even basic things about how the platform performs, or in the case of their past academic research, releasing inaccurate data, or not being clear about how they pulled that data, is just part of a pattern of behavior of Facebook hiding behind walls and operating in the shadows. And they have far too much power in our society to be allowed to continue to operate that way.
Well, I had heard you make the analogy earlier to the tobacco industry, and I think that that's an appropriate analogy. I really believe we're searching for the best way to address the problem. And I'm not sure that it is the heavy hands, like breaking up companies or calling them a utility, which is why your approach of integrating people who understand the math and the uses of the math with protecting privacy is intriguing to me. So the more information that you can provide to us about how that might work to actually address the problem, I think would be helpful. So in my case, this is an invitation to you to provide to my office or the committee information about how we can get at the root of the problem that you've identified and can document, and save people's privacy. So I extend that invitation to you, and I thank you for your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thanks, Senator Lummis. Senator Sullivan.
Particularly on the issue of how this is impacting our kids, I think we're going to look back 20 years from now, and all of us are going to be like, what in the hell were we thinking? When we recognize the damage that it's done to a generation of kids. Do you agree with that, Ms. Hugen?
When Facebook has made statements in the past about how much benefit Instagram is providing to kids' mental health, like kids are connecting who were once alone, what I'm so surprised about that is if Instagram is such a positive force, have we seen a golden age of teenage mental health in the last 10 years? Yeah. No, we've seen
the opposite, right?
We've seen escalating rates of suicide and depression amongst teenagers.
And do you think those rates are at least in part driven by the social media phenomenon?
There is a broad swath of research that supports the idea that usage of social media amplifies the risk for these mental health harms.
So right now, and this hearing is helping illuminate it, we are seeing...
And Facebook's own research shows that.
Right?
Yeah.
Say that again, that's important.
And Facebook's own research shows that. Right? That kids are saying, I am unhappy when I use Instagram and I can't stop. That if I leave, I'm afraid I'll be ostracized.
Right.
And that's so sad.
So they know that.
That's what their research shows.
So what do you think drives them to... I had this discussion with the witness last week, and I said, well, you know, I think they called it their timeout or stop. I said, but isn't that incompatible with your business model? Because your business model is more time online, more eyeballs online. Isn't that the fundamental elements of their business model?
Facebook has had both an interesting opportunity and a hard challenge from being a closed system. So they have had the opportunity to hide their problems. And like often people do when they can hide their problems, they get in over their heads. And I think Facebook needs an opportunity to have Congress step in and say, guess what? You don't have to struggle by yourself anymore. You don't have to hide these things from us. You don't have to pretend they're not problems. You can declare moral bankruptcy, and we can figure out how to fix these things together. Because we solve problems together, we don't solve them alone.
And by moral bankruptcy, one of the things, and I appreciate the phrase that the chairman and you've been using, is one of those elements, which is they know this is a problem. They know it's actually impacting negatively the mental health of the most precious assets we have in America, our youth, our kids. I have 3 daughters. They know that that is happening, and yet the moral bankruptcy, from your perspective, is the continuation of this simply because that's how they make money?
I phrase it slightly differently. We have financial bankruptcy because we value people's lives more than we value money, right? The people get in over their heads, and they need a process where they admit they did something wrong, but we have a mechanism where we forgive them and we have a way for them to move forward. Facebook is stuck in a feedback loop that they cannot get out of. They have been hiding this information because they feel trapped, right? Like they would have come forward if they had solutions to these things. They need to admit they did something wrong and that they need help to solve these problems. And that's what moral bankruptcy is.
Let me ask, I'm going to switch gears here, and this is, what's your current position right now in terms of its disinformation and counter-espionage?
My last role at Facebook was in counter-espionage.
I'm sorry, your last role, okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So one of the things, this is a very different topic, and I only got a minute or so left, but right now, is Facebook, I know Facebook is not allowed in countries like China, but do they provide platforms for authoritarian or terrorist-based leaders like the Ayatollahs in Iran, that's the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, or the Taliban, or Xi Jinping, in my view, our biggest rival for this century, a communist party dictator who's trying to export his authoritarian model around the world. Do they provide a platform for those kind of leaders who, in my view, clearly don't hold America's interests in mind? Does Facebook provide that platform?
During my time working with the Threat Intelligence Org, so I was a product manager supporting the counter-espionage team. My team directly worked on tracking Chinese participation on the platform, surveilling, say, Uyghur populations in places around the world, that you could actually find the Chinese based on them doing these kinds of things.
So Facebook,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
We also saw active participation of, say, the Iran government doing espionage on other state actors. So this is definitely a thing that is happening, and I believe Facebook's consistent understaffing of the counter-espionage, information operations, and counterterrorism teams is a national security issue, and I'm speaking to other parts of Congress about that.
So you are saying, in essence, that the platform, whether Facebook knows it or not, is being utilized by some of our adversaries in a way that helps push and promote their interests at the expense of America's?
Yes, Facebook's so very aware that this is happening on the platform. And I believe the fact that Congress doesn't get a report of exactly how many people are working on these things internally is unacceptable, because you have a right to keep the American people safe.